So welcome to our first virtual 4R field day. A little note there as you see to continue typing your names and certification numbers in. We're really excited about this program. It's something we're doing a little bit new. We didn't get the chance to come together in person for our field day in the fall, unfortunately, due to COVID-19. And so for that reason, we decided to pivot a little bit. We're going to be having virtual 4R field days, and we're taking you to our Susquehanna Orchards in Delta, PA for this session today. We're excited about this opportunity to bring all of you to learn about practices at a specific farm and learn a little bit more about our partner, the mill. We are also really excited about the 4R video series. Hopefully you can hear me. So, okay, it came up that I was muted, so. So, you know, we hope that these videos are tools that you can use when you're working with farmers for other events, for field days and other events. You know, we just ask that you let us know if you're using these tools that we've created in other ways, because we want to know, you know, out to the other audiences. The other thing I wanted to highlight real quick is that we do have a YouTube channel now. We just started it recently. There's only 6 subscribers, so help us out with that. Go check out our YouTube channel and subscribe. These videos that you're seeing today will be up on that YouTube channel later today. Today, our panelists are Mike Kurek from Susquehanna Orchards, Tim Hushen from the mill, and Ben Hushen from the mill, and you'll meet them all a little bit later. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing and turn it over to Eric quick for a brief overview of the 4Rs.
All right, good morning, everybody. Happy to see that we had a pretty good turnout for today's virtual field day session, and we also have next week's session that is going to be with Wolgemuth Farview Farms. So I serve as the executive director of the Pennsylvania 4R Alliance. We've been an organization that's been in operation since about 2012. And for those of you who aren't familiar with 4Rs, it's using the right source, the right rate, the right time, and the right place of nutrients in order to achieve higher economic and higher environmental and social outcomes on farms. We feel that 4Rs applies to manure as much as it applies to fertilizer. And we advocate for a holistic approach to nutrient management that includes a conservation plan and nutrient plans, as well as in-field and edge-of-field practices. A nutrient plan can be a full-blown Act 38 plan, could just be something that a farmer and his CCA put together just to manage fertilizer. Implementing a nutrient management plan, regardless of what kind of plan you have, really takes the right source, the right rate, the right time, and the right place of nutrients to help that farm achieve a greater economic return on the investment they spend on nutrients, as well as helping to reduce their environmental impact and to look ahead to see that they can be sustainable as a business 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. 4Rs, it's holistic in nature. It means that for 4Rs to be successful on a farm, we need a team of advisors. We need the CCAs that are working with the farmer on the day-to-day decisions for fertilization. We need the conservation professionals. We need state and regional regulatory groups. We need the environmental organizations, university research, and the ag retailers, all to make that holistic system work. That's the unique aspect about PA4R. You know, we are a large tent organization that has a variety of different stakeholders that allows a free exchange of information between these diverse groups. And you can be involved. You can join PA4R through a membership campaign. If your organization hasn't received any membership information yet and you'd like some, please let us know. We'll be happy to send some membership information to you. We're always looking for educational and outreach partnerships with organizations, and we're certainly looking to work on projects that help implement in-field 4R nutrient stewardship practices on as many farms as we possibly can. So think of us when you're doing your own projects. Consider joining and being a part of the 4R conversation. We've been busy over the past year. Here's all the stuff that we've done. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. As Katie had said earlier, all the training modules that we have done in the past year, a lot of them are on our YouTube channel. Some of them are on the Clean Water Academy. They're for you to use. Please grab them, use them for your organization. Like Katie said, just let us know what's going on. And finally, before we jump into Mike Kurek and the Mills videos, stay connected with us. If you haven't looked at our Facebook page, follow us on Facebook, check out the YouTube page, check out the website. There's a lot of information on there for you that you can stay connected with us and see what we're doing as a group. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and I'm going to turn the video monitoring or management over to Tim Pushin from the mill. And we're very fortunate in 4Rs to have wonderful members and wonderful cooperators. Today, you're going to meet Tim and Ben Pushin from the mill. The mill is a regional ag retailer that operates both in Pennsylvania and Maryland. And you're also going to meet Mike Kurek, who has just a wonderful farm, Susquehanna Orchards. So Tim, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you can take it away.
Hello, my name is Mike Kurek. We're located at my farm here at Susquehanna Orchards in Delta, Pennsylvania, in southeastern York County. I can trace my family heritage back 9 generations here on this property. I'm the 5th generation having it here in Orchard. We currently have about 75 acres of peaches, 50 acres of apples. We have some acres of pumpkins and also farm about 250 to 300 acres of row crops every year. In the early 70s, my grandmother and my grandfather renovated this barn that we're standing in now, and they started selling some of their second peaches here. Well, as the area built up, more and more people started coming. We started specializing in selling the public our better fruit, and now we pretty much sell everything from tomatoes to corn, the jams, jellies. At a young age, walking the orchards with my grandparents, my parents, they were very conscientious in the conservation practices they used. They took a lot of time, make sure the orchards were planted on a contour, made sure there was swales in the fields to contain the water and not let erosion. I first heard of the 4Rs when I was doing research on how to increase my yield on my farm. And every time I did my research, I kept finding that it was very important to have the right source of fertilizer, the right rate. It falls right in line with the 4Rs. High yield and conservation can go together and both work together. This orchard's about 10 years old now. We implement a lot of 4R practices in this. This peach orchard was planted no-till. The tree probably gets 50% of its nutrient needs in the spring at bloom time with the dry fertilizer underneath the tree. When you do dry fertilizer, you do 100% at a time. It's out there and it's in the elements, and it can be broken down. You can lose some of it. But with the foliar application, we can keep spoon feeding that crop as it needs. Funny story is, so down below here in this valley, there's an old logging road, and it goes down to 2 cabins on a river. And we go down there and walk a lot of times. Well, just to show how much water can move stuff, if you go down there, there's a little beach. There's peach pits down there. So they're washing down this hill, washing into the streams, and getting down there to the river. So the fertilizer stuff we can't see, but in a peach pit you can see that's a lot of ground to travel all the way down to that river. One of the main reasons we got into the 4R and the conservation end of things is the river behind me. There's no bigger thrill than reeling in a 40-inch rockfish out of the Chesapeake Bay, and I want that to continue. I want my kids to be able to go out there and experience that, and we will do anything here at this farm to make sure we are protecting that water source.
Every one of Mike's fields, there's variability within them that we're able to help manage, use the technology to help implement 4R practices. It's not only talking about putting the right amount of fertilizer out there, we're putting it out at the right rate, using the right product, and at the right time to ensure that we're keeping it on the field to be used for that crop for that year.
The Nature Conservancy and the 4R Alliance wanted to put together a nomination for a 4R advocate through the Fertilizer Institute's program that they do on an annual basis. And we decided to nominate Mike Kurek in 2019. They select 5 farmers every year and 5 agribusiness partners along with those farmers. And we were so excited when he was selected because he is the first Pennsylvania farmer to be selected as a 4R advocate.
I mean, I was excited about the opportunity to go down to San Antonio and be around other growers. Like, I think Tim and I were walking the halls with some of the, more productive growers in the country. It's finally a chance where at least I, as a grower, can talk to other farmers, just say, see, this got me somewhere, this did something for me, and hopefully I can help other growers learn and become successful as well. The ground we're standing on now had peaches on it for the last 20 years. This is the second year we put it in corn. With the yield data that we've had and being able to look at our soil maps, I was able to kind of get a good idea where my more fertile soil was, and I was able to up the population to hope to increase yields. Where some of my lighter soils are that's not productive, I did back my population down, but where I thought the corn should grow pretty good, we upped the population a good bit to try to increase yields this year.
But it's all about managing how that land, how that area, that field is going to respond to each of your different management practices. So it's all about that nutrient allocation and understanding what will that corn plant be able to produce, what it will be able to hold. Do you anticipate this field being in corn or soybeans for the next couple of years, or do you plan on getting some fruit trees back in?
We'll probably rotate fruit trees back in the next 3 or 4 years, but I find it's very important to any roots that we didn't get out with the bulldozer from the peach trees, we need them to break down and decompose before we introduce a young peach tree back in here again. Corn's a great rotational crop in an orchard, and we can still make some decent money off this ground growing the corn here. We're 100% no-till. I do not own a disc. I do not own a plow. I think there may be an old 2-row plow growing up in the weeds. There's probably trees growing through it at this point in time, but we don't use those things here. A lot of times after we have a heavy rain, I pack my kids in the truck and we'll take a ride around. We look at the streams to see what's going on. This here is a field that I did not have any cover crops. It's just mowed corn fodder. We had a heavy rain, I'm not sure how much, and snow melt. Here's a little ditch that wasn't here last year. You can tell the water is dirty. There's definitely some sediment moving. This here's a field in 2015 that had barley and then had double crop soybeans. And I had the mill come in and spread cereal rye over top the soybeans. This area here, I've had some erosion problems the past couple years and wanted to see what it looked like after all that rain. There is a decent bit of water still moving down here. It's about an hour after it stopped raining. But you can see the water is very, very, very clean. Way cleaner than just my corn fodder stubble laying on top of the field. We've used a lot of cover crops to try to protect the ground. We try to get them in right after harvest, so there's always a living root in that soil. So Mike, this field was full season soybeans this year, just harvested 10 days ago? Correct. And field average was 69, 70 bushel? Correct. We came back the day after we harvested the soybeans and went ahead and drilled the wheat in. We're less than a week out from planting, and you already got wheat sprigs coming out of the ground, which is a good sign. Get them up early, get those tillers out. Fall tillers are crucial to yield. But then definitely step number 2 would be getting a soil sample. So we know once we can come back in springtime, once the ground thaws out a little bit, we'll know exactly what fertilizer we need to put on to grow this wheat crop, and then also a potential double crop soybeans as well. Can we grab a few probes then? You might as well. I got the bucket. I'd say 12 to 15 cores per field is probably very traditional for our area. And since partnering up, we've kind of transitioned to a more precision sampling program. So for each field, we've had a soil sensor run across it to help kind of redefine, remap our soil types, our variability, trying to define different areas of the field which may be more similar or maybe more different. And then we're also taking some yield data and stacking that on top of it, trying to help
figure out productivity zones. So that's how we've kind of moved from this whole field, which is a 28 acre field, and we've kind of sectioned it down. This one specifically has 4 different zones in it.
During the last couple winters, Tim and I spent the time like trying to figure out what the best economical way to spread fertilizer has been. I think the last 2 or 3 years, I saved roughly 25% of my fertilizer bill doing variable rate P&K applications in all my fields. That's even with the application fee charged by the mill. Blocky ears is my favorite term in the seed book.
Blocky ear.
Yeah.
The one you want.
It's 18 round.
I just counted 32 there.
So, and this map is showing his soil sample information for this field. The whole colored area is the field boundary. So we're not just pulling 1 sample per field, but we're actually pulling 3 different soil samples in this particular field. The zones that are created are based on 2 different metrics. The first one being soil EC. Soil EC is the measure of the soil's ability to transmit electricity, and that can help define variability within fields depending on soil texture or water holding capacity, among other properties. The second way we've done this and how we've kind of divided up these zones is based off of historical yield. So we take multiple years of yield history, 3 years minimum, and we can aggregate into high, average, and low producing areas of the field.
So that's the white buggy is scale. We get it certified by the state once a year.
Okay.
So then that is, as in the combine, it's all computer, but you still need to tweak it.
Yeah.
We recommend once for corn, once for beans, the way wagon. But again, that's all part of that calibration, because bad data is bad data. He's making sure that data is good.
So I see the future of farming. Data is going to be a huge part of farming. Doing the right thing to the ground is going to be a huge part. I was lucky enough that the generations before me were very conscientious to the conservation practices they implemented. I hope that in the future my kids will take over and continue farming and continue the practices that we are and adapt and change to their new agriculture environment that they'll be in.
All right, Mike, thank you very much for participating in the video and being part of that. Congratulations on being the TFI4R advocate and the first one in Pennsylvania. That's pretty cool to have a TFI4R advocate here in the state. And Mike is here with us today. We've got a little bit of time here before we jump into the next video. So Mike, what does being a 4R farmer mean to you?
Thank you, Eric. Being a 4R farmer to me is being able to make like sound ag management decisions using data and technology to better our farmers' profitability, better our yield, and better our environmental impact. And I think, to me too, one of the most overlooked parts of this is the social impact of farming. I have 3 young kids that are involved in school. They're involved in sports. I interact with the soccer moms, the Karens, whatever you want to call them. And so they'll bring up stuff. They're like, "Oh, you're a farmer, yada, yada, yada. You're doing this, you spray." And I can have a really nice conversation with them. And I have data, and I can pull up my cell phone and show them exactly what we're doing. And I can explain to them what we're doing and how it's better for the environment and how, we're trying to work smarter and not harder and doing the right thing. And I think a lot of people just aren't educated enough about that. And we're lucky enough here at our farm. We have a farm market at our farm here. We have a large Facebook following. I consider large, it's about 8,000 people. And we train our staff to have these conversations as well and make sure they know the food that they're eating and buying here was produced safely and has a story to tell and will back what we're doing. And that's what the 4R means for me.
That's interesting that you're using 4R concepts as not only part of your production, but also part of your marketing as well. How does 4Rs fit into your bottom line? Like if you compare 4Rs in your marketing and 4Rs in your production, where is the paybacks?
I think the payback, you know, at the end of the year, with all the different, if you're collecting the data, whether it's through the corn planter, the sprayers, the fertilizer applicators, and then you get your yield data, you have layers of data that you can sit down and with the sound data that Ben Hushman was talking about and good quality data, you can see, all right, if I up my population in this given field, did it work or did it not work? And it's like every field can be your own little test plot. And whether it's a new fertilizer your ag retailer is marketing, you can test it on your own farm. And, you know, and then the next year you have a better decision-making tool. And you can say, well, that product didn't work or this didn't work, and we're going to go in a different direction. And having this data, and a lot of this is cloud-based data that's going to stick around with us for years. And, you know, in a wet year, we may have 2 or 3 years worth of data saying, well, this worked in this wet year and this didn't. And the same thing goes with a dry year. We can go back in time and look at what worked and what didn't work, so we can hopefully make more money, increase our yields, and still be, you know, still be profitable at the end of the day.
Yeah, because if farms aren't profitable, it's hard to pass them on to the next generation.
Exactly. And the next generation hopefully will have this cloud data that they can look and see where this farm's journey is going. You know, they'll have the yield data say, you know, back in 2020, you know, 200 bushel is average or the norm here. And maybe it's, you know, double or not double it, but, you know, maybe increased by 50% or so.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So Mike is going to be around later on in our panel discussion and the open Q&A sessions. So if you have questions for Mike, either put them into the chat now or keep them in your head and push them into the chat later. But we're going to have Tim load up our next video, which is going to be based on the mill. So the mill is a ag retailer based in Adams, York County that serves both Pennsylvania and Maryland and does a whole lot of work with our customers to implement 4R practices and advance nutrient stewardship. So Tim, I'll turn it back to you and you can get us rolling on the next segment.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you to Mike for being able to kind of record that video and kind of pull that curtain back on your operation, see how that evolution for you, how that journey for you has gone over those last few years. This next video we're going to show is going to jump into more of a detailed explanation of kind of some of the tools that are being implemented across his acres, and whether that's variable rate fertilizer and based on the soil sensor that's been run, or taking multi-year yield analysis, taking that historical yield, figuring out where his better producing areas of the field are, and feeding that, reallocating those resources there versus kind of some of the areas that aren't as productive and don't have that positive ROI potential. Variable rate seeding, you heard Mike talk about that as well. And then we also got that satellite imagery piece that's not only helping us kind of target scout, but we're able to pull tissue samples off that, make foliar applications, kind of spoon feed that crop just what it needs when it needs it. And then of course, in corn, Mike is absolutely split applying his nitrogen, putting some out before he plants, and then we're coming back in season, and we're not just checking the box saying, yes, Mike's split applying. We're also using a nitrogen model to kind of help determine in season what those rates really need to be. But Mike's been on this 4R journey for quite a few years now, definitely in the orchard before he got hooked up with us on the row crop side in corn, soybeans, and then now this coming year he's actually got wheat again. But not everyone's going to be ready and set up for everything that we cover and really put it into play for next season. But what we're really trying to hope for this next video is that we get you to put your thinking cap on and see where you're at and see if you can make the next step in your own journey in the nutrient stewardship. So I'm going to get that next video queued up. Hi, I'm Tim Hushin with the mill. I'm the Sustainable Ag Tech Manager.
Hi, I'm Ben Hushin from the mill. I'm the General Manager of the Agronomy Division.
We're out here on the backside of Mike Kurek's farm, Susquehanna Orchards. We're on the pretty much most southeastern tip of York County. Just over the hill behind us is the Susquehanna River, and of course just across that's Lancaster County.
When we approach a farmer like Mike, one of the first things we have to sort out is where are they in the 4R journey? Have they ever heard of it before, or have they heard of it and they're already a couple steps, 2-3 steps down the road? In the case of Mike, when he asked us to come to this farm, he has been on this journey since the very beginning. And based on some of his family history, he was very in tune and very ready to get into what some farmers would call Chapter 5, where others are ready to start at Chapter 1.
When I came back to the farm, I was kind of lost in the row crop end of the business. I mean, we did not grow row crops, we rented the land out. So I had to find someone locally that I trusted and I knew would give me good information. And that's when I got my relationship with the mill and the Hushin family. And they really helped me learn about new technologies, implementing them on our farm. And I think very quickly they knew I wasn't scared to try something new.
Mike fools around with data at night. I don't know how with 3 kids, but he does. And he said, Tim, we need to dive deeper on this.
So this would be the field forecasting tool from Winfield United. This would be the newer nitrogen model we've been using. And it has kind of like a maximum, your 100%. That's the most biomass you're able to produce that day. And depending on whatever kind of stresses are out there, whether it's water, nitrogen, potassium, those are kind of the 3 main components that they talk about. Kind of shows you predicted what did you get based on the models. And then of course, as soon as you get into grain fill, it starts doing the same thing. Instead of plant biomass, now it's talking about grain biomass. Mike's been on this farm, this field's been at least partnered with us on the 4R journey for the last 5 years. Yield history, soil samples, fertilizer that was spread, and throwing those all together, putting some analysis behind the scenes, aggregating them together. So we're pretty much layering them on top of each other and saying, all right, here's the better area of the field. Even riding in the combine, Mike or any grower will be able to tell you, yeah, this area of the field does better than the others, or this area isn't as good. But we're able to take computers and take analysis and figure out specifically where is that point in that field? Where can we kind of lump those more productive areas together and create zones?
The farmer wants to farm. They don't necessarily want to sit in fact, rarely do they want to sit in the office and try to grind through data. Any combine, probably any piece of machinery in the last 8-9 years, it has all the technology on there. But the farmers weren't using it because it's hard.
Be able to use this technology to help implement the 4R practices. That's not only talking about putting the right amount of fertilizer out there, but making sure what we do, we're putting it out at the right rate, using the right product, and at the right time to ensure that we're keeping it on the field to be used for that crop for that year, and not so that it falls down into the Susquehanna River, which if I zoom out just a little bit, you'll see is right over here. We are just on the top tip of that hill, so everything starts flowing in that direction. So we need to be conscious about every decision that's made.
For like the zone farming, I'm able to spend my fertilizer dollars where the field is most productive. And like this area here is a highly productive area. We're able to increase the amount of fertilizer we're putting down. We increase the plants per acre, and we should have our higher yield. Down at the bottom of this field where there's it's lower lying area, may lay a little wet, we're not going to get the same return on our investment if we do the same amount of fertilizer, put the same amount of seed in the ground. And the zone farming and the yield data and all the data we collect helps me and Tim like put a plan together in the spring of where we're spending our dollars at. And that's really what it's all about, along with the conservation end.
We input everything that's happened in the season, when he planted, what the population was, what the yield goal was, any fertility that's been applied, nitrogen, and there's some soil data, some soil types, slope, organic matter, just some inherent properties of the soil that's being calculated, and then of course weather plays a big factor. There's weather models that are in there too that's kind of predicting, all right, where have we been so far in 2020 when we're in season getting ready to come back in and say, hey, we need X amount of more nitrogen to attain our yield target without under applying and shortening that crop, or over applying and spreading more than that crop's going to take up. So after doing precision soil sampling, we get our results back. We know which area of the fields are calling for more or less of each nutrient. We can develop, there's plenty of tools out there that can help develop fertilizer plans and make those actually into a variable rate prescription.
So there's the recipe. So he takes the recipe, goes into each bin for each individual ingredient. You can go ahead and send it out if you want. So once it's mixed in the drum that you see turning, once it's had its proper mix time, it's going to come out of that drum into one of two hoppers on the spreader. Sometimes we can put nitrogen in one part, one section of that spreader, and phosphorus in a different section, and then we can actually variable rate two different plant foods, two different fertilizers as we go across the field.
And then when it comes time to plant corn, whether you got a liquid fertilizer unit on your planter, whether you got a dry box, whatever it may be, we can include fertility into that pass as well. So that's talking about right placement and right time, trying to get nutrients applied as close to when they're going to be used for the crop. We've had really good results with split applying nitrogen.
When yield monitors started being more popular, probably 8-10 years ago, we were able to start collecting data on farm instead of just using university research or private research. So I think it was 2011, 2012, we had some growers start asking us, hey, can you come back? We've had a lot of rain. Why don't you come back and put a little more nitrogen on my farm? And that began our journey, another step in the 4R process, when the yield monitors that fall started coming back and showing a yield difference. Then we took farmers, we'd say, what is your normal amount of nitrogen you put on? And we say, let's split that. Let's put 60, 70% of that on pre-plant when they're doing their weed control. And then the rest of it somewhere around knee-high corn. We'd come back through and put the rest of it on. In some cases, the farmers were able to do it that second application themselves. And that was pretty much an 80 to 90% win. So we didn't add nitrogen in 2012. We took their money and reallocated, spread it out.
With using a nitrogen model on this farm, this field, we've been able to cut pounds of nitrogen per bushel back from the traditional 1 to 1.2 pounds needed down to 0.8. That's the farm average. This isn't just including the most productive land. This is including all the fields, the highs, the lows, everything. When you look at the dollars and cents, when you talk about market of nitrogen now, market of corn right now, we're about $9.50 to the better. That's going not just back into the grower's pocket, but also keeping that out of the water system. We're not over applying nitrogen. We're making the same amount of bushels or more using less nitrogen. So once the crop gets out of the ground, whether it's corn, soybeans, wheat, whatever it may be, we have the ability to activate, turn on some satellite imagery. And there's two main pieces that I really like about satellite imagery. One, helping monitor crop health, and the other piece also as a more directed scouting approach. Every week, hopefully maybe more than once or twice a week, when new images pop up, we get not just email alerts saying, hey, a new image is here, but there's also a change detection tool that's happening behind the scenes. So it takes the new image and is comparing it with older images and the most recent images and saying, all right, here's what the previous scale was looking like, here's the current one, and how much change was happening. And we're not just looking at crop health, we're also monitoring development that way as well.
I have to tell you, I have gray hair, so you would understand I'm a little hesitant on some of the technology. And turns out, that the satellite imagery is able to pick up things that are about to happen to a plant. And it picked up that it was on the edge. It wasn't deficient, but it was on the edge of being deficient from a couple micronutrients. If you're a 200-acre farmer or a 4,000-acre farmer, you can use that tool. And you can use that tool for some cases $1 or $2 an acre. It comes to your phone. You got dairy cows, you don't have time to go out and walk your fields. Look at that and say, something's going on out in field 7, I need to go look. If you have 3,000 acres, you don't have time to go look at all those fields. You can scroll through, see which ones have something going on, and then target, as Tim mentioned earlier, scout that field. So small farm, big farm, that's one of the easiest ways to make a big improvement on your farm.
It's one thing saying, oh, my field did 200 bushel the acre, but it's another thing where you can actually see it on a piece of paper or a screen. And today I can go to the local coffee shop and pull up my cell phone and see what my fields did, see which variety I planted in that field, see how much fertilizer we put on. And that's, I don't even know how you put a dollar value on that. It's been a huge tool for us. And I think if you want to have high yields on your farm, you need to be following the 4R practices.
All right, thank you to Tim and Ben and Mike and all the crew at the mill for helping with that video and allowing PA4R to put that together. So we're going to move into a panel discussion. So if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask Tim or Ben or Mike, please put them into the chat and we'll see that those questions get asked. I'm going to start off just by asking each one of you to just share where you think farmers could start with their 4R journey.
I can go first. At a young age, my dad always told us to be successful in business, you needed to follow the 3 C's. Now it's communicate, complete, and check. And I can correlate them to, starting a 4R practice. With me in like the data technology end of the business, like, we first need to start collecting the data. So you need, whether it's your ag retailer doing their applications of, spraying or fertilizer spreading, ask them for those maps or send the file to you and start keeping them. And then the communication part of it, you kind of need to be able to share this. A yield map on a piece of paper it's a good tool, but it's a starting point, and it's a starting point. But we need to be able to like take this information and send it to your ag retailer or your agronomist or whoever else you're doing business with, and it's easy shareable. And then at the end of the season, you have you can check everything, and you can go back and check and say, all right, I did good, with the fertility. I did good with making sure the fungicide applications were timed right, and I had the right seed that planted. And I think it's a huge tool just to check of what you did and what you did right. If I was a new farmer and I needed to start, I'd probably invest in some sort of GPS tractor and also some technology on my corn planter so I could start making these seeding maps and start seeing what I was doing and being more aware and checking. But if you don't even have the technology end of it, it's a lot of times it's getting out of the tractor and checking what you're doing, checking the corn planter, make sure the seed's the right depth, make sure that fertilizer spreader is calibrated right, your sprayer's calibrated right. And scouting is a huge tool for me, and that's free. That's just time. And the more we can get out in our crops to check how they're doing and, educating yourself to see when the deficiency is starting in a plant and being able to react quickly, that's huge. And I think that's a good keystone to start out with is just get out there and scout and check your equipment and do all those things.
Yeah, and I think just kind of piggybacking off of Mike, the 1 C that he mentioned was that conversation. And I think definitely from the ag retail side, for a farmer to reach out to us and just start that initial conversation. We can start asking the questions, then we can kind of really pinpoint where they're at and to kind of work towards kind of building that baseline and then taking that next step. Because I don't think there's, in that 4R journey, I don't think there's a specific spot that says start here. Just kind of figuring out where each of you are at, whether it's across whole operation or just individual farms. And then we can kind of meet there, and that can be our starting point.
Yeah, there's no like go to the equipment dealership and say, hey, I want a 4R package. And at least I don't think that's being sold right now.
Very well said, Mike. And again, both of you already covered it. It starts with a conversation. And I'll also add, some sort of partnership. Find from your local machinery dealer, from your soil conservation office, find people who want to work with you one-on-one on your farm. Invite them out to your farm and see if you can begin that conversation. And again, it doesn't matter where you are. It's just getting started on that journey.
So Mike, as I was listening to the videos, I was kind of jotting down all the 4R practices and the tools that you're using on your farm. And I just want to read them off and have you fill in what I missed. So I've got soil sampling, tissue sampling, variable rate fertilizer, variable rate seeding, yield monitors, data management, split applications of nitrogen, satellite imagery, and nitrogen modeling. What other 4R practices are you doing that wasn't listed on the video?
I'm sure there's more that we're missing, Tim. That might be a better question for Tim, but yeah, I think you hit most of them, and
yeah, and I
guess that might be a better question for Timmy.
Yeah, no, I think you definitely pretty much covered at least kind of on that precision, that technology piece. But Mike, I mean, you think about how your farm's laid out and kind of where fields are, what crops are next to each other. So it's not the traditional strip cropping maybe, but you got orchard next to corn and soybean fields and kind of vice versa. And then your grass waterways, your contour farming. You're not farming the whole way to the river. You got plenty of woods area to kind of help be that filter as well. So I think that's another key piece that we probably didn't highlight in most of the video, but definitely one that you are absolutely employing across your farm.
So I'd be curious if each of you could spend a moment just sharing how you feel conservation fits in with 4Rs.
So I guess I can start. I mean, I think just in general, when you talk about conservation and 4Rs and agronomy, I almost think they're like a triangle. They work in a synergy. They work in conjunction with each other. And thankfully, just the whole agronomy and 4R type conversations are also becoming more intertwined with conservation every year, every season, every day. Because successful agronomy recommendations and implementation is going to be founded on 4R practices, and that ultimately is all based around just a conservation mindset.
I think too, if you start talking to some of the leaders, and whether it's yield contests across the country, you hear what they're saying, and then you go to a conservation meeting and you hear what they're saying, it's lining up a lot. Like they're parallel, and I think they go together, and it's just being smarter with what we're doing and knowing what we're doing.
And Eric, if I can jump in a minute, I know in our organization, we're trained agronomists. We had 5-6 trained agronomists, and we had been around conservation, but certainly we're not qualified to talk conservation. So we began several years ago reaching out to local conservation district, worked, obviously had been around the Nature Conservancy folks, Pheasants Forever, NRCS. We started inviting them to some of our most recent summer field day to put on some demonstrations. Partner up, just like we suggest farmers need to find partners. We needed to find partners, and 4R connected us to a whole host of those, that's for sure.
So Ben, one follow-up question for you. The majority of the participants on today's call kind of work as conservation professionals, whether it's for a conservation district or for an environmental organization. What's the best way for them to engage an ag retailer?
Wow. I know for us, I'm not quite sure how we arrived at this, but for us, we kind of made a business decision to change our mindset several years ago. We realized to coexist with consumers and farmers. And again, we work in Southern York County and also down in Maryland. So there's plenty of houses and neighbors. And just as Mike said, neighbors are asking, farmers, landowners are asking, what are you doing on my farm? What are you doing to make it better? What are you doing in my neighborhood? So we decided, as a company mindset, that we were going to stop focusing on selling tons of fertilizer, and we were going to start focusing on optimizing fertilizer. We know that leads by optimizing fertilizer and its use efficiency. We know, we've learned through a lot of trials that Tim and Mike have talked about, that improves to improve profits and improve yields. But how do the folks on this call get the local dealer to change their mindset? I guess just begin to have the conversations, because again, as I said earlier, they are probably agronomists at the local ag retailer, and they're being challenged to sell more every year, find more farmers, and it is a challenge. And I would just encourage folks on this call to begin opening the door to those conversations.
Yeah, I would also add that almost every ag retailer has a customer appreciation day, a winter meeting, a pesticide meeting. There's always space at those meetings for an organization to bring a table and set up and interact with farms and get to know the ag retailers that way too.
And Eric, I'll throw one more thing. 4Rs, we have learned, has a positive ROI. And I think maybe that can be part of the conversation with those folks is, hey, and again, almost like for the folks on the call, finding the ag retailer, find out where they are on the 4R journey is probably just as important as an ag retailer finding out where the farmer is.
So I want to thank Carl for putting into the group chat about the link for the importance of scouting article. Check that out on your own time if you can. One of the questions that came in on the group chat, what's the best way to sell the idea of using technology to farmers if that technology is difficult to use? So I think I'm going to divide that into two questions. A question for Mike: how difficult was it for you to adopt technology on your farm yourself? And then Ben, looking at your total customer base, what percentage of your farms just need help with technology adoption?
Mike, you can go first.
So when I started, I really didn't have a corn planter, didn't have a row crop tractor. So as I kind of stair-stepped my equipment up, the technology end of it kind of came with it. And it wasn't like I jumped in overnight and had all the precision planting stuff in my planter overnight. It took me a while, and it was a stage. And every step we'll just add another piece to it, and usually that opens the door for the next one to come in. Going back to having a cloud-based area where you can put all this information together and be able to share it with your agronomist or ag retail, there's a huge value in that to me. And Tim does a lot of the behind the scenes stuff for me. He manages my data. I may have, when I planted the field, put the wrong field number in. He can go in there and fix that for me. And so he's kind of taken on that role a little bit, and it's taking the pressure off of me. But and if while I'm planting, they know where I have Liberty beans planted or where I have Canva beans planted. So if I'm not doing the application, they know, and they can look up and see it themselves.
So Mike, follow up to that. How hard was it for you to learn how to upload all that information? Or how hard was it for you to get your tractor and your planter and your combine to all talk to the cloud-based system you use?
I reached out to the people that knew it. I went to my local John Deere dealership. They had a technology guy there. I said, this is what I want, this is where I want to go. They did that part of it. We talked with Tim and Ben at the mill and said, hey, listen, we have all this stuff. I know you guys have it in PDF files and we have it in maps. How can we get it all together and use it use it together and be able to share back and forth. And especially during like COVID times where, this past spring, it wasn't like we could just walk into the ag retailer's door and have a conversation and pull out our maps and stuff. We had to do this, over the internet or a Zoom call or a phone call. And that way we knew what we're doing was right.
So Eric, I have seen for quite a while, and I'm sure most of us on the call, you go into a farm and they've got the yield maps in a really neat looking 3-ring binder, and they may have their soil test somewhere else. It's hard. And then they buy a green tractor and a black corn planter, and then New Holland has the best combine. It's all hard. And I said that in the video. I hope it wasn't insulting. Farmers are smart, but it's all about taking that time. And I kind of go back to the 50s and 60s when soil tests were first put in front of a farmer. They had to be overwhelmed. I know the first one I ever saw, it was overwhelming. And I kind of liken that to where we are today with technology. It's a powerful tool, just like soil tests were. But what did you do with that soil test? You went to somebody to help you through that process. And I think when farmers are sitting in a meeting, I know I have done this, and somebody says, we got a new technology tool. Everybody gets emails every week about a new technology tool. And after a while, it's almost like the wah, wah, wah on Charlie Brown. You're like, oh my gosh, not another one. And again, I think that's when you need to find a partner. And that's why we in our company decided we need to designate a person, Tim, and actually also Joe Hushin, that was their focus, is to try to help these farmers take the books off the shelf, as Mike said, and combine them into something. So it's a process. It's not because farmers aren't smart. It's because their time is limited to learn things.
Thank you all. So we have about 5 minutes left in our call, and there's a handful of questions yet that we'd like to get to. But before we exceed our time limit, I'm going to turn it back to Katie to do some housekeeping items. So Katie, I'll turn it to you.
All right. Yeah. So it's great hearing all these responses, and please continue to enter questions. And again, as we said, if you have a question that you'd like to speak, you can go on off mute and or send a chat and let us know that you'd like to go off mute to do that. But we're gonna continue on for a few minutes after 12 to get all those good questions in. But one thing I wanted to touch on is if you are seeking CCA or nutrient management credits, please re-enter your name and your certification number into the chat box so that we can get you those credits. And you can start doing that now. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that we have another virtual field day coming up next week on March 4th, also at 11 o'clock. And if you haven't registered yet for that, we encourage you to go ahead and do that. That is going to be another really interesting session. We're going to be focused on Carl Dirks, a farmer at Wolgemuth Farview Farms in Mount Joy. And he's going to be talking a lot about, his 4R journey, and then in particular, his use of seed selection as a tool for making better nutrient management decisions. So that'll be another really good session that we hope you join us for. The other thing I wanted to mention is that following this event, there's going to be an email coming out this afternoon with a poll, and we would appreciate if you could answer that to help us with knowing how to better serve you. And again, please let us know if you're interested in using these videos for one of your events, because we would love to get them out to as wide of an audience as possible. All right, I'll turn it back over to you, Eric.
All right, thank you, Katie. And just thank you all for joining today. I have two last questions that I think will fill up the last remaining minutes of this session. One for Mike, and then one for Tim. All right, I'm going to start with the one for Tim. You mentioned in the video about reducing nitrogen use efficiency. from 1.2 pounds of nitrogen per bushel of corn down to 0.8. Number one, how do you calculate that? And number two, once you go down below 1 pound per bushel, where is the corn finding the remaining nitrogen?
Yeah, so good question. The first one that I'll cover would be, how do we calculate that? And that would be by taking the total amount of nitrogen that was applied in that area, in that field for this year. And then you have to divide that out with the yield. So that way we can kind of figure out how many pounds of nitrogen it took to grow each bushel. And typically in the past, that has very much just been done kind of as a broad average, whether it's across the farm, whether it's across the whole operation, whatever it may be. It's a very simple thing to do. But with Mike and the way that he's progressed and kind of the journey he's been on, we're not at, I said that as an overall average at 0.8 pounds, but within each field, there are multiple zones, and we were able to calculate each zone depending on nitrogen use efficiency. And a lot of that comes back to having his historical data, his yield data, and being able to calculate, all right, over the last 5 years and the 3 years that it's been corn, we have an average yield goal ranging from 140 bushels to 260, and kind of a bunch of different jumps and gaps in between. And so we're able to kind of manage each zone for what it actually can produce. So that's where we're able to kind of variable rate that nitrogen as well to kind of coincide with that. I think there was a second part to your question.
Yeah, just curious, if you take nitrogen use efficiency down, the lower you go, you go from 1 pound per bushel down to 0.75 or lower, the corn plant still needs a certain amount of nitrogen. If it's not getting the nitrogen from fertilizer, where's it getting the nitrogen from?
Yeah, so I think some of this comes back to right time, right placement, right source, right rate, all the 4 R's. So we're split applying Mike's nitrogen in actually more than 2 different applications. We get some pre-plant. We try to get that timing to where we're as close to planting as we can. And sometimes we're even after he plants. He's definitely been experimenting with some planting green and done that a lot as well. So there's definitely some cover crop nitrogen that factors in there, plus nitrogen stabilizers. We are a big proponent, and Mike is a big believer in nitrogen stabilization as well. So trying to protect all forms at all times. So I think that's probably some of the key areas that we're able to kind of drop back on that nitrogen rate and still maintain that yield.
All right, thank you. And Mike, last question for you came in on the chat. Do you have any concerns about broadband internet connectivity with your equipment?
Well, yeah, I have a lot of concerns about broadband internet because I do not have like high-speed internet here at my home. Besides, we're working off like 4G data for everything. We run our credit cards through a machine or our store with a SIM card in the back of them. So yeah, I think when time comes where, whether it's Starlink or one of these other internet sources come, it's going to help things a lot. I'm not sure if I'm like concerned if it's like, if someone's going to hack into my stuff. I'm not too worried about who has my information. I'm very willing to share my information. So, but having, better wireless service or a faster internet would definitely be a benefit to me.
I think one of the eye-opening things for me, Mike, is if you're having internet broadband issues in southern Pennsylvania, which is close to Baltimore, close to Harrisburg, high population centers, what internet broadband issues are farmers facing in the north central part of the state or the northern tier part of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a struggle, but a lot of the stuff that you can do offline and, transfer it to like a USB memory stick and, take it to, the local coffee shop that has Wi-Fi and upload it to your computer.
So, okay. Well, I want to thank you all for participating in the panel discussion today, and also thank you for being part of the videos. Thank everybody for joining our webinar today, and look forward to seeing all of you next week when we get to have conversations with Carl Dirks from Wolgemuth Farview Farms. So have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.